Love me a good peace sign. Anyway, welcome. Welcome to In Session. Like, for those who are new here, hey, welcome to the squad. Welcome to the family. For those who have always been here, rocking since day one, welcome back. The door is always open for you. So I'm gonna let the guest of honor in. Let me just send her a request, and then we're gonna get started. Okay, so I sent the invite. I hope she got it. Let's see. Fingers crossed that technology is on our side so we can start. Let's see. Let's see. I'm just try it again. Okay. All right, Sheila. See if you see the invite that I sent you. And if you do, click it and press accept. Let's see. All right. She says she doesn't see a request. All right. Let me try to send it again. If not, you can try to press what looks like. Hold on. You can try to press what looks like a video camera looking thing. Do you see that? So it's something next to the word, next to the comment box. Can you see something next to the comment box? It looks like a video, and it has a plus sign in the middle of it. Let's see. Do you see that? Let's see if we could get her in. Come on, technology. Do your thing. Let me see. All right. Let me see. Let me see what the issue is here. Let me see. Let me try one more time. Then we're gonna figure this out. We're not gonna give up. I'm clicking again. All right. I try something different. Let me know if you're able to see it. All right. Wait a minute. I should try something. Let's see, fingers crossed, because let's work out.
Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I had to get on my phone. For some reason, the computer is not letting me on the phone. That's where I was able to click on the little camera.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't know. I don't think I've ever tried on a computer, but I would imagine, like, I've been on Instagram through the computer before.
Yeah, I guess maybe the web browser version doesn't work. I don't know. I was like, let me just go on my phone just in case. I'll figure that out next time, just because I know the camera on the computer is a little better. But here we are.
Anyway,
I am.
welcome.
Thank you.
It
Thank you
worked
for inviting
out.
me. Yes,
It
yes,
worked out.
yes.
It worked out. So I'm gonna do a little mini introduction, and then we're gonna get started. So, hello everyone. For those who are new here, my name is Raquel Simmons. I am a marriage and family therapist, and welcome to In Session. So, In is an acronym for the word intentional. So, intentional sessions, where we use this platform to talk about all things from relationships to yourself and relationships to others. We also use this platform to talk about conversations that are often silenced, because just because it's silence and just because we're not talking about it doesn't mean it's not happening. So I am joined here by the amazing Sheila. I want you to introduce yourself and then we're going to get started. So
Ooh. So well, I see a few of my folks joining in. Thank you, thank you. So I'm Sheila Arias. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I had the honor to supervise Raquel sometime last year, so that's why we were able to connect. Again, this is a pleasure to be here, start these conversations. And like Raquel, I am all about relationships. That can be intimate, romantic relationships, to parent-child, to friendships, to professional relationships. So we'll be diving into a little of that work. I guess real quick, I can just say I am the owner and founder of Compassion Therapy, which I serve first-gen immigrant Latinos, but just BIPOC. And I really work with individuals and couples in navigating, again, different type of relationships and their dynamics, and really helping them learn, right, that we don't have to suffer and take what is based on what we've learned in our families and our cultures, and that there's endless possibilities as long as we're willing to really learn what God is there and, right, learn different approaches and, to be able to thrive in our relationships.
Yeah, thank you. This is not one of the questions that I wanted to ask, but just off of that, what stood out to me is that we don't have to suffer. And so I wanted you to just touch on that. What do you mean by we don't have to suffer and just take what it is?
Yeah, so with the work that I do particularly, I'm just going to put an emphasis on couples, but this also shows up when I work with individuals, because most of my individual clients are talking about a boyfriend or a girlfriend or some sort of relationship. And I know, right, being Dominican and just being Latina, one thing that a lot of us have learned and been conditioned to is, right, either the patriarchy or how women are supposed to behave, right, or how dynamics look like, particularly in long-term relationships of like, yeah, you don't have sex anymore, or yeah, you're like roommates, right, type of connection or daily rituals that usually happen early on in relationships. So the suffering part that I mentioned a few seconds ago really connects to this idea of being in a relationship looks like the way either our parents or past generations have portrayed it. That we do have autonomy and choice and to change that. Right? If things aren't working well, how can we learn to share that? But before we share that with our partners, because usually I know that can look like into conflicts, right, and arguments, is how can I check in with myself and acknowledge what's happening and what's creating these intense emotions for me to then share this with my partner, and hopefully I'm being open to also share like what's happening, right, and what are we experiencing. So suffering sometimes can be a choice, and when I say a choice, it also connects to the lack of awareness, right?
Yeah.
And the lack of giving ourselves permission to do different, right? Or to choose different. That's a lot of the work that I do with my clients, is really put an emphasis on that, right? And really question. I'm very curious when it comes to anything that we do as humans. And I'm always like, oh, but how come, right? What about that versus this is what it is and that's it? Because it keeps us in the very rigid space, the black and white thinking, which I like to go into the gray areas, because as humans, we're very gray.
Yeah, thank you. Giving ourselves the permission to choose differently. I think that was such a powerful statement, because it's true. Some people, we all have a choice, and some people, choose choices that are not as beneficial to themselves as it could be. So being able to put that on the platform, saying, we have the opportunity to change things or question more things. So putting that responsibility back on yourself is huge. So what is, in that case, then the key to a healthy relationship, in your opinion? And that's super loaded, I know. So, people are probably not going to agree with you. So we got to open the floor to different perspectives. So what is a healthy relationship to you?
I mean, it's very loaded, and I don't think I have one answer.
Okay.
There's so many factors that implicate a healthy relationship because, to be honest, what healthy is for you might not be for me.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a big believer again so most of the work I do is family systems. And for those that are listening that have no idea what that is I always go back into how did you learn to be in a relationship? What the relationships look like in your family system, and your family system is, your parents or whoever the adult caregivers were, your siblings, and if there's extended family that helped raise you, right? And relationship is not only romantic and intimate, but friends, extended family.
Yeah.
How did you learn that, right? So to kind of come back to your question, which is very loaded, is how did he learn how to be in a relationship, right? What felt good, right? What didn't? And with that, it also goes culture, right? The gender narratives, socioeconomic education, right? Being part of systems that are oppressed, right? Being people of color, right? Or being part of just marginalized communities. Like that all impacts, right? Effective relationships. Or how can a relationship be effective and healthy? But to kind of just name at least one or two things, and this I get a lot from like the Gottmans, which are, if any of you aren't familiar with the Gottmans, they're the top researchers just in couples therapy, and like they have 20, I think 30, 40 years plus in that, and it's the foundational work of friendship, right? Which is respect, admiration. We lose sight of that all the time as we evolve in our intimate relationships, really showing appreciation for each other, right? Again, like I said, respect, and really just being open to the other person's experience. We too often fall into, oh, you did X, Y, and Z, and then we get defensive, and then we want to go and like throw bombs. And it's like, if we can take a pause and just listen to that person's experience, and that person is someone you care and you love and it's important for you and you prioritize in your life, we're able to separate ourselves from the personal aspect, right? So if my husband is telling me, oh, like, it really got me upset when you didn't even notice that I cooked for you, for example, right? Instead of me saying it's like, I could easily get defensive and say, yeah, but you barely cook, right? So like, why would I even pay attention to that? And that can turn into a fight is, you know what? Thank you, right? Thank you for sharing, because I can see it was important because you made that effort, although it's not your forte, like, which it is, by the way, just in case he's watching. That's his field now, really, which I love and appreciate. But right, we easily go into that, and I think that's something that we learn, right? We see it around us, right? Not only in our communities, but again in our family systems, friends, right? People around us. TV shows, right? This has been normalized that if someone says you made me feel a certain way, particularly if it's an emotion that's intense, right? Like anger, frustration, we too easily go into like, I need to protect myself, and we end up dismissing their experience, and then that keeps you in the loop of just conflict and escalation, right? And the arguments and the fighting and whatnot. So I guess to answer your question is respect, and with respect really aligns, can I listen to my partner's experience without taking it personal? And then can I ask questions, right, about it? And friendship, right? I'm sure when a friend tells us, hey, you made me upset because of X, Y, and Z, we don't jump the gun as quickly as we do with like an intimate partner, right? So can we hold our partners in that same level or capacity as we do with friends, right? And with that goes fondness and admiration and showing of appreciation.
That was such a great response. Let me just start there.
Thank you.
And I agree on so many levels. Even having experiences with working with couples, and as simple as how often do you guys appreciate each other? I mean, when I tell them to even something small, like say something nice, they'll come to therapy and it's just like spilling so much of, she's not doing this, he's not doing this. And it's just like, what's going well? And it's always like something, a conversation that takes them like left when I'm asking them like, all right, so what's going well here? They never expect it. And it's the strangest thing because why not? You know, why can't you see something, or why can't you give them that same level of grace as you would with a friend? Um, and what I'm hearing also is a whole lot of like being able to self-reflect. You know, what's important to me may not be as important to you, but why can't you at least give me that space to hear me, you know, and not go to that specific immediate defense mode where it's just like, you know, if I say, oh, well, at least unless you should cook an example, well, thank goodness, you know, finally, you know, it's just like, relax, you know, you don't have to go there, because then one, that will make the person, your partner, not want to do it anymore. And now we're having like a tension, you know, tension in the home over something that you could have just said thank you for. I mean, it's the smallest things, but you know, it's a work in progress. So I like that you asked, you know, how did you learn relationships? I think that is huge, because sometimes that's what we mimic. If we learn it there, or what we try to stray far away from. So it goes like hand in hand. So now we got the healthy part. What do you feel like an unhealthy relationship is?
I mean, depends who you're asking. um, it's tricky. There's certain words. So I believe there's so much power in language and the words that we use to describe our experiences, the people around us, right? Our relationships, the way we describe ourselves. And I'm very intentional when I try to choose the words that I use. So even unhealthy and healthy, it's tricky, because again, how are we defining these things?
Yeah.
I would say effective, right?
Okay.
What would you define ineffective? I'll say ineffective. Ineffective relationship versus a effective one is ineffective is going back to the respect, right? Disrespect, which is you're diminishing the person all the time, right? You're either calling them names, you're cutting them off, right? Like the gaslighting that we hear a lot of the times. This constant state of hostility, right? Constantly being up here, right? Like the fighting match, the screaming match that we get into. Of course, any type of abuse or anything, we can kind of go into that. But more of the foundational pieces is each partner, right? Each participant in this relationship, because it's not about one person, it's about how each partner is able to have a space to voice concerns, right? While still honoring themselves in the relationship, which is when I mentioned the effective parts. Ineffective is you don't have a voice here. What I say goes. Oh no, right? You got me mad, right? I hear this all the time. No one gets no one mad, right? Yes, you get mad based on the experience, but that is not the other person's responsibility, at least when we're referring to adults. If it's children, it's a whole other conversation. But with adults is the whole blaming, right? We get caught up on that because of you, I did this. So then we don't take responsibility for our behaviors and our actions, and that's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be very ineffective because the other person cannot control, and that is not the other person's job or responsibility for you to behave or interact in a loving, engaging way. That's up to you. And if you're choosing to constantly blame and point the finger, which is something that I teach my couples a lot, is how can we own up to our behaviors and our engagement, right? And that's, yes, apologizing, but more, how can we acknowledge what we did, right? So if our partner is saying, you hurt me when you did X, Y, and Z, how can we take an acknowledgement for that, right? For the behavior, even if that wasn't your intention, right? I hear this all the time. My intention wasn't to do that. It's not about the intention, is that this person outside of you perceived it in that way. And that has to be validated. The same way as you experience something, that has to be validated by your partner as well. So ineffective, again, another loaded question. There's so many factors that play out in that, but the foundational parts, right? The lack of respect, particularly if there isn't a voice for each partner, if there is a lot of diminishing, cursing, right? Power over, manipulation, that I would describe. And of course, we can spend hours just talking about what that can look like.
AKA, take accountability, y'all.
Yes, that's the first step. Before we start doing anything, if we can see our flaws and how, like, I fucked up in that situation and you fucked up, we're gonna move on. But when you can't see that, that's what keeps couples, right, in that same pattern, because they keep focusing on the other person. And I'd be like, look, yes, we can do that,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't change the person outside of you.
Yeah.
You can only make changes with your own awareness within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're able to at least take that step, we're both moving in a different direction, and we're able to take responsibility and then say, okay, what can I do differently now that I have this information versus what can my partner do differently?
Yeah.
Because we cannot change anyone at all,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes. So, in the spirit of Valentine's Day and all the love, how would you dissect trauma bonding? like, say, yeah. How
Mm.
would you? And this is something that I see all the time, very often, and especially when I won't even say that. Very often within so many different relationships, where everyone on the outside could possibly see, like, you know, what's going on in the dynamics within the relationship, but two people are so attracted to each other, and it's based on just their level of, oh, you've been through that, so have I, let's, you know, maybe we should be together. And in reality, they're just together based off of their experiences, and not necessarily off of the fact that they possibly shouldn't be together, or, you know, they got to find a different angle.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, trauma bonding. I had a client who recently brought it up, and I was like, oh, I haven't really like looked too into it, but I know the concept of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Being able to engage because of similarities, right? We
Yeah.
can even remove the trauma out of it, but we usually connect with folks that have some sort of, right, similar taste in like the food or travel
Mm-hmm.
or intellectual conversations,
Yeah.
right? Like there's some familiarity in like how we experience life. And trauma, unfortunately, is part of that,
Yeah.
right? Connecting with someone because we have a shared experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? I would take it beyond the trauma bonding, more like our attachment, right? I'm not going to go into whole
Yeah.
attachment theory and all of that, but
Mm-hmm.
what about that feels safe, right?
Yes.
Going back to our family systems, right? Like when you were experiencing this with your family or caregivers, around you, what about that felt safe, and how are you feeling, or how are you experiencing that now with your intimate partner,
Mm-hmm.
right? And even then, it's tricky, right? Because it goes back, like outsiders are seeing it and they're like, no, y'all are super toxic, like y'all shouldn't be together, right? But then it's like, okay, you're not that as an outsider. And again, that's how we're defining it. But I would be curious, like, what is the safety there and the security?
Mm-hmm.
Because depending on our experiences growing up, what we define as secure and safe for the next person is not.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to really dissect, like you said, that connection is, what about that feels safe? Oh, only when I would get yelled at, I would feel safe because that was the only time I would get attention. If not,
Mm-hmm.
if it was a silent treatment, then I wouldn't,
Yeah.
right? So I would, I'm always curious, right? I never like to, I'm not going to use the word never because I don't like to use absolutes, but I try to steer away from, oh, this is trauma bonding or this, or like this is toxic.
Yeah.
I'm always curious, like, okay, what's the stability here, right? What's
Yeah.
keeping you stable? And how was this learned, and how do you define it?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it comes from somewhere, right? So people gravitate for many reasons, are attracted to each other despite the dynamic seeming hostile,
Yeah.
right, or shaky or toxic. But how is that playing out for the two people in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship? I don't know if I really answered your question on
No,
dissecting,
you
but
actually
it's
did.
okay.
You did, because what you said, and I loved your example of, you know, maybe being yelled at, what the outside looking in is like, oh my God, this, you know, what's going on? But that's your sense of security because of that attention that you're seeking. Whereas maybe if you're given the silent treatment, or things is too quiet, people feel uncomfortable in that. And it's just like, oh my God, did I do something wrong? What's going on? What did I do? You know, you're asking so many questions when everything is just like at a standstill, when no one's speaking. But then when I'm yelling at you, it's like, oh, okay, this is love. This is my security. That was such a great point to even put. I don't think I've ever thought about it
But even
like that.
I want to just jump in real quick, right? Because what came to mind is I'm gonna take it to like my experience, right? As a
Mhm.
mom, Dominican culture, right? Like the Dominican woman is an expert at yelling at their kids for them to get their shit done, right? So it's if that has been your experience, right? Yelling, and I think we can even remove it from just like the Latino mom. We
Mhm.
can go into just the Latino culture
Yeah.
where screaming, yelling, right? It's been normalized, even when
Yeah.
we're having a good time.
Mhm.
Um, but it's so normalized that you end up learning, right? Your brain is like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, but
Yeah.
it's not happening. And not that everyone equates to
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but that's a big contributor on how we relate, right?
Mhm.
Again, I have only learned that I get attention is when my mom would scream at me.
Yeah.
So that can be usually two
Yeah.
satisfactions. It's like I would not, right, be
Mhm.
receptive to screaming, or that's the only way I can really feel secure and loved and that I'm important for you because
Mhm.
you're being intense in an emotion that I'm familiar with,
Yeah.
right?
You definitely answered the question. Thank you. That was great. That was a great example too. All right. So on a different side, how would you or what are your thoughts on love bombing?
Again, I'm curious. Well, for the person who's receiving it or the person who's doing it?
Mm.
Because there's two.
That is two sides. Okay, okay. Receiving it.
One, what about that interaction with your intimate partner? Or I'm just going to say, because you can be dating, right?
Mhm.
I remember having a client who would use that a lot in the past where she would tell me, yeah, I started dating this guy and he's already like love bombing me. And I'm always curious, like, what about that engagement is having you define it as love bombing?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
it also gets tricky when you see someone showing appreciation and fondness and
Yeah.
then right and it's not even I love you words, right? It has nothing to do with that, but they're showing some type of affection or um what's the word I want to use, they're showing some forms of love,
Mhm.
and if you're not used to that,
Yeah.
that can also, right, if you're like, oh, that's too scary, you're going to
Mhm.
want to separate
Yeah.
and you're going to name it, oh my, this person is love bombing me because he's too much or she's too much
Yeah.
or they're too much, right? So I'm also curious of what that means,
Yeah.
right? So even for the person that's receiving it is how come you're labeling as love bombing?
Mhm.
What about that is creating some
Yeah.
sort of fear, anxiety,
Mhm.
discomfort, right?
Yeah.
Usually like, ooh, he's texting me too much, right? Or he's calling
Oh
me.
my
And
goodness.
I'm like, Mijita, let me tell you, we're not used to that, right? If you're
Uh-huh.
used to the one reaching out to the guy all the
Mhm.
time, right? And you being the one doing the work, if someone is doing it for you, it's going to feel very
Yeah.
foreign and
Yeah.
out of place. So it's going to bring up a lot of discomfort.
Mhm.
Um, so it really depends on that, right? And if we're, as we're learning and kind of diving into it, then it's like, how do we talk about boundaries and again, initiating these conversations of like, okay, we've only been dating some amount of time. Like, I love how engaged you are. And also, I want us to slow it down, right? Because
Yeah.
there is some sort of pace that usually when folks are dating, someone is like hitting the accelerator and someone's like hitting the
Yeah.
brakes. And even in long-term relationships, there's always someone who's like, shh, someone like
Mhm.
back, right?
Mhm.
So I like to also highlight that from the person who's receiving it.
Yeah.
The person who's giving it, similar question. What
Okay.
about this person, right? In this engagement that, you feel like you have to text them every like 10 minutes, right?
Mhm.
Or tell them how beautiful they are every 5 minutes, right? And it doesn't take away, right? I'm not trying to go into the if, this or that.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious into, again, what about that makes you feel good? What about that is possibly coming from an anxious? Only if
Yeah.
I call them a lot, they will still remain
Yeah.
interested in me. So it really depends. I know there's a question. How can you tell the difference between both? Between what, Jalissa, if you can put it there?
Yeah. Can you please
Like
elaborate? While we're
trauma bonding and love bombing,
love
or
bombing.
which?
All right, let's do that while the Jalissa is giving more of a detail. What's the difference between trauma bonding and love bombing?
Well, the trauma bonding is more connecting with someone due to a traumatic experience, right? And traumatic is, right, I like to put the difference in like capital T trauma and lowercase t,
Yeah.
right? Because anything could be traumatic, right? You came out, perfect example, you take the train in New York City, you're minding your business, next thing you know, a fight goes out. That's traumatic, right? You're shaky, you're like, so that, and then there's like the bigger T's, right? Any experiences where there was a huge loss, of course,
Yeah.
different types of abuses, natural disasters, right? Things like that. So trauma bonding is essentially anything that connects you to someone else. Usually we hear this sometimes with friends, connects you with someone due to shared experiences in a traumatic way. And then love bombing is this overly, right, exaggerated way of showing love and constantly like admiration and like you're the best thing, you're the most beautiful woman in the world, you're the most, right, like super exaggerated.
Yeah.
Love bombing is someone being affectionate and caring. Okay, she was able to elaborate.
Yeah.
So what I just said, love bombing tends to be exaggerated,
Mm.
right? Think someone, I don't want to put it all the way, again, excessively like obsessed, but someone who's telling you how much they love you, like every 2 minutes,
Yeah.
right? Or again, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. Like I will kill for you. I would like very
Yeah.
exaggerated, right?
And
Think
then,
about sometimes what we see in the movies.
yeah, I also want to put like emphasis on also the time frame in which you both have been dating. So if you're like 2 seconds in, unless you're in the LGBTQ community and we're having a different conversation. But what I mean, if you're like, a few months in and then we're just like pushing and pressuring and all these things and it just feels like overly excessive, that's when it's just like, okay, it's time to have that type of conversation where, why are we doing this? What's going on? Why, we just met, especially those, like if we just met, there's no way that, certain behaviors, should be so super excessive. And if so, why? Like what you're saying on both parts. And so I don't also want people to be confusing of, and again, this circles back to the self-reflection of, is this something that's happening? Are you being love bombed, or are you uncomfortable with the way the person is expressing their love? And so that is something that you have to definitely reflect and do some self-reflecting on. Like, is this uncomfortable because you're not used to receiving this level of love and that this fashion, or is this person actually love bombing you? So you have to really do some self-reflecting and ask questions, what's going on? Where, how do you see us versus, because this is how I see us. And I thought we was just dating. So where you think we at? We in a relationship or
Are
what?
we in a situationship?
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about, right?
Like, I've been talking to other people. How are you saying you love me and we've been only talking for like 2 seconds? And like I said, unless we're in a different, one of the alphabet communities, and then it's normalized where you just, together for 3 seconds and then y'all married. But other than that, yeah, just pay attention and then definitely ask questions.
But I want to add one thing, right? Because I think I saw something about like affectionate and like caring and affection and love bombing are different because you still want to show appreciation and like words of affirmation and all these different ways of showing love. But the excessiveness,
Yeah.
right? The exaggerated, like, oh my God, I'm doing this because I love you, right? And then the person is like checking your phone or whatever. Or I'm only doing this because I care so much about you, right? Or like, who are you going out with tonight? Oh, can you send me your location, right? Like,
Yeah, I want to make sure you
and
feel safe.
these are conversations that unfortunately we don't have in different phases of relationships, right? We kind of go from like, okay, we're dating, we love each other, we care about each other, honest, and we move in with each other, right? And we don't really talk about what does the different commitment levels look like, where now, okay, we're sharing each other's location because of safety, let's just say, or we're disclosing certain information, right? Like these again have to be conversations with the person you're dating or, in a relationship with. And it doesn't mean you do not show, is like you said, Raquel, right? Like what is the discomfort that might be coming up if I feel like it's too much? Is it more of my experience or is it because this person may be doing too much because of their own anxiety? If I don't show up this way, then, you know, they're not going to like me or they're not going to continue dating me, etc.
Yeah.
Right? I know, hold on, Juju. She said something like, I won't exaggerate nothing. I know she was probably kidding. Or maybe not. We can probably chat later on. Because I'm always curious, like, how come do you need all this validation, right, from someone as well to constantly tell you again how great you are, which is needed, and also there's certain limitations.
Yeah. All right. So let's switch gears and just talk about dating culture as a whole. Dating culture, especially today. What do you feel like some of your thoughts are on like the emphasis on the way we are dating now, and the rush to get married, or the rush to be in a relationship versus the rush to be super independent and be alone, and the way that society is portraying different views on dating now. I know that was a lot. So, how do you feel like society is portraying dating, the overall dating culture now?
I mean, I hear this from my clients and my single friends because I have not been in these streets in like 15 years. So I have no personal experience, and I know it's rough out there. So I'm definitely compassionate, right, and hold so much space for that. I think there's so many ways to kind of view it. I do believe the rush, right? First of all, depending who's dating, what is like the location, right? If we're focusing on the tri-state area, right? New Jersey, New York area, like the fast-paced living impacts everything, right? So even when we're dating someone, it's like, okay, so when you gonna call me back for the next date? Or when are we gonna do this? When are we gonna do that? This pressure also with age. Again, I see this mainly from my women clients where, okay, I'm this age, I'm dating, but then it's not leading to anything. So it's this rush of like this linear way. And I'm always curious, again, who defined this, right? Like, where did this narrative, right? I mean, if we think about, we live in a patriarchy society where I'm going to put it right in the binaries of women and men have been designed to engage in romantic relationships a certain way, right? Like you said, the LGBTQ community has shifted that, right, in so many different ways. Plus also the roles that have changed with genders, gender roles and all of that between women and men. But I think right now it's, yes, the rush, but then there's like the dating apps and all of that, right? Of like, what does that define? But one thing I am seeing is that there is more of a sense of the self-reflection that you mentioned, right? The self-awareness of, okay, what does this look like? People are more open to having conversations. I know therapy is a big thing as well. Like people are like, okay, so are you in therapy, or have you, like, or just any type of personal development, right? Because I don't believe it's the only way. There's multiple tools of navigating self-awareness and all of that. But there is an openness to really share, right, certain experiences and have conversations of, like, usually before you would, of, okay, if you're upset, how do you manage, right, anger or conflict, where no one talks about that, like on the second date, right? There isn't really much of that happening. So that's that. But going back, I think the dating apps have been tricky based on my experience working with clients who are on the dating apps. And again, just friends who have tried it, it's very just superficial. And when you want to kind of go a little bit deeper, a lot of the folks there aren't, right? They just want to go for something casual, fling, etc. So it is tricky. But I don't know. I think I have mixed feelings. Like, I'm super hopeful because folks are more open and realizing, like, okay, dating doesn't have to look a certain way. We're open to dating multiple people and learning what that looks like. Or if we want to be just exclusively dating each other, we can also have that conversation versus just assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. It was just I wanted to hear your perspective overall on, like, I've heard and I've had experience on, dating is rough. Let's start there. It's a I've heard it saying that it's like pee in the dating pool or something, because it's like it's rough. You just and I've heard and I've seen a lot of people like after COVID, we don't know how to communicate, or we don't know what it feels like to have these like face-to-face interactions now, which is why online dating has become super popularized, if not now more than ever, because that was the way that we had to communicate through the apps and all the things. So I asked that question just because there's I think it's different views. So I was interested to hear your views, and I think it's like society pulls us in both directions, so no direction is clear. Whether that is, no emphasis on dating, we should be single woman, going after men for money, and that's it, taking their money and leaving. And I mean, it's that narrative. And then there's not as much of a narrative of, oh my God, we should probably settle down, get married, or, and then you don't get that narrative until you start aging. And now it's like, wait a minute, now we're reflecting and our biological clocks are ticking, and now we're trying to find someone, but we don't have the tools to do it, or we feel like we're too late in a sense, which is not true. But these are different things that I've been able to like hear, that I wanted to just bring to you, because people feel like it's too late for them to start to find I don't know, someone, so they just settle for someone.
Mm-hmm. I don't believe in the absolutes again.
Mm-hmm.
It is too late. That's an absolute. As long as you're alive and you're breathing and you're moving, you can be 100, you can be 15, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me not go to my teenage, but as a consenting adult, the age is nothing, right?
Yeah.
It's never too late to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we get to decide. It goes back to choice, which I shared early on, right? When we started speaking, we get to decide how we want to define our dating experience. I was
Mm-hmm.
just talking to a client, like she's navigating dating after like a 4-year relationship.
Mm-hmm.
She gave herself some time. That's when we started working together. She went into the apps, super overwhelming. She was like, "Oh, I started talking to like 2, 3 guys. She narrowed it down to 2, and then now it's 1." And I'm like, "That's your choice, right?"
Yeah.
Some folks are okay at the beginning talking to multiple people. Some it's like, "No, I'm gonna try you out." Then we'll kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm.
You get to define what dating looks like.
Yeah.
Does dating look like for you, oh, you know what, I do want to see you at least twice a week in person versus only on the phone or
Yeah.
video, right? You get to define that. On top of that, I'm always curious on the qualities,
Mm-hmm.
right? Again, I'm going to speak from a woman's perspective, right? I'm going to be a little biased here, is we sometimes focus so much on what we want from the other person that we're dating, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I want a person, right? Like you said, a guy who makes a lot of money,
Yeah.
who's like chocolate brown, 6 foot something,
Yeah.
right? Has like this like 7-figure job.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, right? We can sit with that for a little bit, but I'm always curious on like what qualities bring up in you,
Yeah.
right? So if you are, again, it goes back to friendship, right? That's why it's
Mm-hmm.
one of the foundational parts of how do you want to see yourself, right? If having intellectual conversations is important for you because it really connects to your personal values and
Mm-hmm.
beliefs, is okay, I want someone who can really stimulate me, right?
Yeah.
Intellectually. Or I want someone who's such a foodie, who's down to like eat anything,
Yeah.
explore, or laughter is important for me.
Mm-hmm.
Family is important. So how can
Yeah.
I bring this person right into conversation about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get to decide and shape your dating
Mm-hmm.
experience, right? And this is with many other things in life, but particularly with dating, like you said, we're so focused on like, oh, super hyper independent, which
Yeah.
again, I'm always curious where that comes from because
Yeah.
our fellow Latinas here, we're all been raised to be super independent and not
Uh-huh.
depend on no man. And that also is an extreme, right? But yeah, having that choice and that awareness, right? Before we make the choice, we have to be aware that we have a choice, and then we have to give ourselves permission. And that's the scary part.
Yeah.
Can I allow myself to date in this way that's different than my friend or my coworker is, right? You know what? I don't want to date on an app. People still meet in person, right? If your interest is like stand up or open mic, that might be a place to navigate.
Yeah.
And also allows you just to connect with other people on an interpersonal level, because like you said, COVID cut a lot of that out. People don't know how to interact in person anymore, right? For the most part. So it's like, how can you expose yourself without even the idea like, oh, I need to go out and meet someone? Is I just want to connect with people.
Yeah.
I just want to talk, get to know, because that also allows you to see what comes up in you, right? If there's a certain discomfort, if you feel good, if you know what topics you can discuss and all of that. And then the dating aspect can come in. But we too often are on a mission, right? Especially as women, on a mission, I need to find a man, etc. And it's like, okay, can we pause that and just connect and learn how you show up in relationship, and then from there we can go into the whole like, okay, this is, you know, maybe a person that I'm potentially interested in, and, you know, explore a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like at that ulterior motive. Yeah, like I'm like, why is that tripping me up? But yes, we go in with like a mission, like we have this like amazing fictitious thought process where it's just like, by this age, this is where I want to be, this is what I need to do, and then we get that age, and then all of a sudden we're in therapy because we're not where we thought we would have been, and we don't know why. But instead of just allowing yourself to explore, allowing that opportunity to try things out, try things new, you never know. You might actually like a specific thing that you probably never would have known if you didn't allow yourself that opportunity to do so.
And one more thing I want to add before we jump into the next question is, where did you learn this? Right? So this idea, right, from the time we're super young, we're taught by our mothers or women around us, or just, right, our community. It's like, oh, make sure you find, right, someone who can care for you, who can provide, who, you know, drives a car, does all these things. So then my question is like, whose narrative is this, right? And it's not only with dating. This is a career choice. This is where you live. Like, there's so many things, right? Like, is this your narrative, or is this your parents or your family members or your culture? That you need to find a person that meets these criteria. If not, then you're going to be like lonely for the rest of your life, right? And it's really empowering, right? So again, when I was saying earlier about the words we use to describe our experience, is like, how can you take your autonomy back, right? Because we're so, of course, impacted and influenced by so many things around us. But how can we take that, you know, autonomy as adults that we are, consenting adults, to say, you know what, no, like, as we dig and go through, which again, in therapy with all my clients, I go through this journey of where did this originate from, right? And slowly what has been the experience that have impacted this thought process, or this way of seeing your dating life, is also help with the empowerment that you get to decide. Right? Because it's your dating experience. Nothing that people are going to suggest, they're going to criticize, they're going to input, but you're the one living it. So when there's choice and we're intentional, the choice we're making, we're so much happier. We are able to experience joy, pleasure, and this just sense of like connection that's so different compared to when we feel like we're forced in a relationship.
Yeah, I agree. Another off the you know, out of the ordinary question, but with being in a relationship, and particularly married for a long period of time, what are some ways that you can share to be able to reinvent your marriage and be able to reconnect, to make sure that you're always seeing like your partner as that friendship, or having that same level of power and respect within your relationship?
I cannot emphasize the most. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough. Think about when you're dating someone early on, you're constantly checking in. It's like, what are you into, right? What are some goals you have in life? What are some things you want to do together? That starts to die out as couples become more long-term, right?
Yeah.
This whole idea of like dreaming and goals for each other as a couple, a lot of my couples are like, I haven't thought of that, right? Or maybe one person has, right? There's a disconnect. So having those continuous conversation, and how do we do those continuous conversation? We have to be intentional, especially once we take that step into commitment of living together.
Yeah.
There isn't structure, right? Before that, when you're dating, you're like, hey, yeah, I only have time to meet up 5, after work or whatever, right? Like people don't see that, right? And I like to highlight that. When you're dating someone, it will be intentional because you have to figure out with each other's schedule when you're going to see each other spend time.
Yeah.
Once we live together, it's like, oh, we're living together. We don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, you do, because life is still lifing. It's still happening. You have work, and if there's kids involved, right? If there's family, there's a bunch of other stuff. We lose sight, and that person becomes our roommate or just someone we live with.
Yeah.
We have to carve out intentional check-in times. This can be weekly, this can be monthly, whatever works for you is we have to put in a calendar, let's do it, because if it's not there, it's not going to happen. It's the same thing if you want to meet up for coffee with a friend who you haven't seen in forever, it's not going to happen, right? And that's usually early on just to create the habit, but once you see how it's working out and how great you feel and the connections you're able to make with your partner, then you don't have to schedule it because it just becomes second nature. But any sustainable relationship, and this, you asked me about being married, but even in a friendship, right? Because I'm navigating a lot of friendship like evaluations lately, and with the clients I work with, long-term friendships, right? We've been friends for 15 years, whatever, is that intentional timing to connect, right? And with your partner, again, it can be connecting with like, oh, so what do we want to do in the next year or 6 months, right? If that's traveling, visiting something, taking some time off, whatever the thing is, asking about their interests, right? Like my favorite color was purple. I was just talking to my husband about this not too long ago. Was purple 15 years ago. I don't fucking like purple anymore. My favorite color is brown and like the olive greens and like all that. I don't have a favorite. I have a bunch of favorite colors. So interest, similar questions to get to know someone who's new in your life. We still need to continue that because we are evolving. We're not the same people we were 15, right? I was 17. I'm 32 now. I'm not the same person, right? So having those intentional times is important and prioritizing. Another thing is really learning, right? I'm sure most of you, if you haven't heard, like the love languages, right? Learning what your love language is, right? So like being able to acknowledge, like, how do I feel seen, heard, and important in my relationship? For me, it's act of service is the top one, and quality time, right? So again, my husband is winning in that. If that's like cooking something or cleaning up or taking the kids a bath, whatever it is, like stepping up, I know you're showing up for me because that's an area that I need your support in, right? Quality time, again, hanging out, going for a walk, right? We're intentional on, doing dates, even if we can't go somewhere, if that's at home. The same thing for my partner, right? That's physical touch, if that's words of affirmation, right? Really learning how do you feel that sense of connection and security within your relationship, knowing each other's, and even if the way your partner likes to receive it, you're not familiar with it, we attempt to learn, right? So if affection and physical touch hasn't been your thing and that's your partner's and you're having trouble with that, doesn't mean you have to be overly, again, exaggerated, hugging your partner all the time. It can just be like a little cuddle or a little like, shoulder rub or massaging their feet while you're watching a show. I don't know, like it can start off like really slow like that and just really have, again, the conversations of how uncomfortable it is because you're not familiar with it. Or if it's words of affirmation, right? Or again, that all goes back to the appreciation and fondness that we have for our partners. And that's what sustains a relationship long term, when we're able to show up for our partners in this way, and vice versa, they're able to show up for us, because that keeps us going, right? Like, oh, I really love the way my partner did X, Y, and Z, right? And that becomes a story when conflict comes up, right? You don't see your partner as the enemy. Now you have, again, these emotional deposits, as the Gottmans like to say, right? Because there has been these, these admirations and appreciations. When things do get heated, it won't escalate as much, because you don't see this person as like, oh, you're evil, you're the villain. Is, I get it, they're in their feelings, it's heated, whatever, and you're able to work through that differently. Versus a couple who's in this constant state, this chronic state of negativity and lack of that, right? The blaming, it really just separates it. So there's foundational pieces, which is admirations, check-in times, right? Intentional times, and the dreaming and goal setting.
Yeah. Well, you touched on so many points. I just want to like pull out. So first off, thank you. That was a great response. Like
Thank
everything that you said, I'm just like, oh my God, these are my points. Okay, cool. But I want to highlight a few things that you said. One of the things I want to highlight is I'm not even the same person I was this morning, you know? Like, so you can't expect that your partner is going to always be consistent. We're not consistent. So don't put unrealistic expectations on someone else, especially when we should never have those for ourselves. So a few hours ago, I wasn't the same person. You cannot expect somebody to still be the same person that they were 5 years ago, and you guys are 5 years into your relationship. So it's very important to always check in, like ask this, the smallest questions. Don't be afraid to date each other again, to get to know this newer version of each other. The other thing that you said was love languages, which I'm happy that you touched on, because I'm just like, yes. But more importantly, I mean, love languages gratefully are becoming more popularized, but to be able to utilize them in an effective way is very important. And one of the things that you said was, even if you don't have the same love languages, asking them, what does this look like? If you're not used to words of affirmation because your love languages are acts of service, ask them what this looks like. Don't pretend that you know what you're doing, or you don't have to pretend, because when you're pretending, now you're saying, you're thinking you're doing what you're supposed to do, or you're thinking that you're doing all the right things, and being very frustrated when your partner is not receptive to them. But in reality, all you have to do is ask them to see, you could have been thinking that you're doing like this grand old, like, doing your big one with them, and you're actually always missing the mark, and it creates a lot of frustration. So I'm happy that you said that, because normalizing the fact that we don't have to like to think the same things, and we don't actually have to love the same way. It's just about that willingness to be receptive to learning how to love. So,
And to ask, right? Like you said, um, don't try to do something and then not play out, because it ends up putting more harm. And one thing I hear a lot is one partner saying, oh, I just feel like I'm not enough. I've tried all these things, I'm not enough. And then I'm like, well,
exactly.
then you ask, right? Because just if I tell you, oh, words of affirmation is something that I love to receive, what does that even mean, right? For some
Exactly.
folks, is writing little notes around. For
Mm-hmm.
someone is, a text message, hey, I hope you have an amazing day, or
Yeah.
I can't wait for you to get home so we can do whatever, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
ask, right? We too often want to
Assume.
assume to avoid that discomfort and
Mm-hmm.
like not knowing.
Yeah.
It's okay not to know. When we think we know it all, that's when we fuck up.
Yeah. You make
And
an
that ends
ass
up
out of
harming
yourself.
even more. Yeah, you make an ass out of yourself. So being able to ask, and the more you get accustomed to asking, that just draws more connection,
Yeah.
because now your partner's like, oh, they're interested, right? They want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And then that also ends up rubbing off on your partner, like, oh, how can I ask, right?
Yeah.
Again, gift giving is one, right? It's one of the love languages.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean you have to buy me a Chanel bag or whatever.
Oh.
Is I really appreciate when you come, right, with like a flower or
Yeah.
one of those little chocolates, right, that they sell
Mm-hmm.
in like Rite Aid or whatever.
Yeah.
Or making something,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, like, or bringing my favorite food, not like after a stressful day of work.
Right.
Being able to share that again allows that other person to take in that information and know that, okay, these are some ideas.
Yeah.
And I have to put that pressure on, like, I need to figure this out.
Yeah.
Again, relationship is about two,
Mm-hmm.
and is really being able to have that shared experience and just make it important to speak to each other.
Yeah. I agree. Thank you. So one last thing, and it's just a little bit of a shift in gears, and it's the visibility of therapy within our community. So why do you feel like that's important?
Because we don't know it all.
Say it again. Actually, just say that again.
We do not know it all, right? We do not, right? As humans, we do not. I think it's so important to have a tool, and I'm going to, define therapy as a tool, not the tool, because I know so often it's like, oh, this is the only way. There's many ways to create these spaces, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing now, different forms. our communities have been doing it for generations, right? But I think it's so important just to normalize that we're not going to be great in relationship. We're not going to be great with ourselves, and just having an objective view, someone who can support that not only has training, but some sort of shared experience, right? So again, my focus is really supporting first gen Latinos, but again, just people of color, right, in relationships. And I have that shared experience of when a couple is sharing something about like machismo or like gender roles, is like, yeah, I can gravitate to that, right? Particularly being a woman of color in the Latino spaces, I get that, right? Like, I get it, right? And also, these are some contributors, right? As I ask questions and psychoeducation. So, yes, I hope we can continue having these conversations to really normalize that it's not something scary. You don't have to believe in it, right? I remember one of my favorite therapists was like, I'm not Santa Claus. You don't have to believe in therapy, right? It's gonna work as long as you're putting in the work, like anything else. You're gonna see results at the gym as long as you're putting in the work, right? You're gonna get better at, I don't know, public speaking as long as you put in the work, right? Like you're gonna get, it's a skill set, and usually you need, it's a support, someone who's able to provide you with that tool, keep you accountable, right, in the process, and really help you learn and become aware of what has impacted. Whatever the issue is, right? In this case, relationship, whatever is impacting the relationships, really helping you learn about yourself and how you participate there.
Right. Last one. So what do you feel like, or what do you feel like is some type of advice that you could possibly give for someone who's entering the dating realm, who hasn't been dating for a while, or who's just got out of a long-term relationship, who's getting their feet back into the dating field? What kind of advice would you give to someone like that?
I usually start with, again, checking in with yourself. Like, how do you see it? How do you define it? Like, how do you want to see yourself? What are the qualities that you would like to see in yourself, right? Because when you're able to connect with yourself, the process becomes so much smoother, right? There's challenges, right? Because just getting to know people in any capacity is challenging. But when you're able to have a sense of who you are and how you want to show up, you keep yourself in that space. Because way too often I hear folks saying, oh, I lost myself in this relationship, or like my past relationship, right? I really experienced this, like, these challenges because it was all about them. And it's how can we put a little bit more emphasis? And that doesn't mean that you're selfish, right? We need to start redefining even that term. That means you care enough about yourself and the relationship to make sure that that's a priority, the same thing as for that person, right? So really learning right, their qualities and what you want your dating experience to be. Right? We're getting mixed messages all the time about dating. And if you're able to sit down, either through journaling, writing, or even audios, right? I know the iPhone has like this new journal app, which is a game changer even for me.
I'm like, what?
Yeah, I've been recording myself and I'm like, yep, and then I go back. But if you're able to really allow yourself to ask yourself these questions, and like, how do I want this dating experience to be, right? I did it when I was, 25. I'm now 30. How do you want that to be as a 30-year-old individual, right? Taking time and kind of checking in with yourself, even as you're in it, really allows you to, again, have choice versus I'm just going to go with the flow. And the next thing you know, going with the flow, you end up in some dangerous waterfall.
For sure. Thank you. Yeah. And give yourself some grace. Don't put unrealistic expectations on yourself, and allow yourself to be open. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for joining. That is the end of our questions and our conversation. But thank you so much for joining. If you want, I would love for you to just kind of share your contact information. If anybody has any further questions, feel free to kind of just say your platform again for those who just came in.
My nephew just said hi to me. He's so cute. If you go to my page, right, I have the link tree there that has my Psychology Today, whoever's interested and seeking out services with me. have like 2 or 3 slots. My caseload has been pretty consistent
Very
and booked, but
good. Booking
yes, which is
is
great, of
just
course.
amazing.
But also finding other ways to still support that, and also my website is there, which is compasiontherapy.com. So
Yeah.
it's compassion with one S, right? Because it's compasión in Spanish.com.
Mm-hmm.
And also there you can learn a little bit more of the work that I do and how you can connect. And also sending me a DM, that's perfectly fine. Just connecting with people because I love connecting with others. And if we can't work in a one-on-one setting, I'm always open to supporting, particularly our community, because I want more of us to be in it. I know this
Yeah.
space has been very unfortunately whitewashed,
Mm-hmm.
and
Unfortunately.
bringing in culture and just this shared experience
Very
along with
important.
mental health and just wellness factor into it just really helps. So again, my Instagram, Sheila Arias _25. I think I always forget
It'll
which way it
it'll
is.
be also LinkedIn. You guys
Yeah.
could make sure that you check it out. I'm gonna put all of her information below as well, and she'll be tagged as well. So it's gonna be very easy to find you. I hope.
Yes. Yes, yes. Thank you, Raquel, for this
Thank
moment. I
you.
actually feel great. I was so nervous getting on, but thank you so much for this
Listen,
opportunity.
it's a conversation. It's a conversation, and it's within the comfort and just to share all of your knowledge and then some with whoever is watching the world. Let's say that with the world.
It's okay.
So
We're hitting these 9 people that are on right now. That's the most
mm-hmm,
important thing because it's hitting these 9 folks. So
right.
I appreciate you,
Mm-hmm.
and I hope we can have many more talks,
Yeah,
many
we
more in
definitely.
sessions.
Yes, we will. We definitely will. So again, thank you all for joining. Again, this is In Session. In is being an acronym for the word intentional, where we have beautiful conversations like the one we just had, where we're spreading joy and light over conversations that needs to be had. Because just because we're not having it doesn't mean that it's not happening. So again, my name is Raquel Simmons. This is the beautiful Sheila. You guys can find her all on all the platforms in her bio. I'm gonna put all the information there as well. But have a great night and thank you.
Yes, good night. Good night, everyone.
Good
Bye.
night. Bye bye.